This is a hospital story time, so if you're a little bit more squeamish, this might not be the video for you.
Hello? Is it alive-ish? Hello.
All right, are we ready for the story time? Are we ready for where I've been for the past 64 for the past 6 months? December 1st. It's the start of daily December. It was the start of my big, like, almost subathon. I was gonna be trying to stream every day. I was gonna stream for the entire month. It was gonna be great. But December 1st, I wake up and I'm in a lot of pain. Holy crap, I really, really hurt. But, show must go on, whatever. Get some Tylenol and I start my stream, hang out for a little bit. I only stream for like an hour or two. I get off a stream and I go back to bed. And the next day, holy crap, I'm really in pain again. This really sucks. I'm gonna have to cancel today. And so already daily December's out the window. Daily December, it's gone. I'll make up for it later. It's gone, whatever. And the next day, it's even worse. It's so much worse. It was so bad, but I'm like, I can't go to the ER. I can't go to the ER. We've gone to the ER before. There's nothing they can do to help me. I've been there. There's nothing they can do. I'll just muscle through it. So for some context, I have ulcerative colitis, which is autoimmune disease. It's essentially a simplified versions of Crohn's, if you know what that is. Basically, my guts are trying to themselves. That's the best kind of context that I can give you. So we gone to the ER before. There's nothing that they could really do. So I'm just like, all right, I'll hide in bed. I got ibuprofen, I got Tylenol, I'll just hide out here for a while. Another day goes by and couldn't do it. So I dragged Adish out of bed at 4 a.m. and we drive down to the ER. And while we're there, throw up in the car, just no big deal, just casually throwing up in the car. And then in the triage chair, but not on a nurse. I didn't throw up on a nurse. I was very worried about that, but I didn't throw up in the lobby. So I didn't throw up in the lobby and I didn't throw up on a nurse. So I take those wins. So we finally get settled. They get us back into a room, which having like a severe chronic illness and being in the ER is very funny because it's like having a fast pass at Disneyland. Like you go into the triage room and they're like, hey, your heart rate's really high, and you just walk past everybody. So we finally get settled. I get my blood drawn, I get some IVs, and the doctor she comes in and she sits down. She's kind of like going over everything with me. So some more context. There's this thing called hemoglobin, and hemoglobin basically measures like the amount of blood in your blood, if that makes sense. So the typical range is about 16 to 12. That's a healthy range. Just 16 to 12 blood units, whatever it means. And so it's really, really common for like women to be anemic because of like menstrual cycles. If you have nosebleeds or if you have other autoimmune diseases, you can be pretty anemic. If you have chronic blood loss, it's pretty likely that you'll be anemic or have low hemoglobin and low iron. So the doctor comes in and she sits down and she asks me about my pain, which was absolutely horrible. She gets me set up with morphine, which is a whole nother tangent that I could go on. But she put together this plan and she said, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to give you 2 units of blood today because your hemoglobin is at a 5.5. So we need to fix that. 5.5. I don't know how to put it into context. It's hard to get across how critical that is. The best way, whenever we told people in the medical profession that that's what my hemoglobin was, their immediate reaction is, how are you standing? So I get these 2 units, which basically just means 2 bags of blood, basically. And they ship me on up to the med-surg floor. It's like the dump floor where there's no specific issue. And it turns out that I was septic, which, yes, that is the big scary word that they throw on in medical TV shows, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, we gotta go to surgery right now, septic, What happened was I was on nothing but steroids to treat my ulcerative colitis. I was on nothing but steroids for several months. And essentially that being on the steroids allowed the damage from my guts to seep into the rest of my body and make me septic. So they slapped a whole bunch of antibiotics at me. They get me started on treatment. So this is where I need to add a little even more context. So when you have a low hemoglobin, basically you don't have enough blood, sort of. So there's less blood and less blood cells to carry oxygenated blood to all of your organs, right? Like your brain and your heart. And so your heart has to work just that much harder to carry the oxygen throughout your body. So it's beating that much faster because it has to move so much more blood to carry more oxygen. So when you have a low hemoglobin, your heart rate can also go really, really, really high. So my hemoglobin was, 5.5. So they kept a heart monitor on me because I came in with a heart rate of 180. So a few nights into my stay, I get up to go to the bathroom. And so before this, my heart rate was really high, hanging around the 120s at rest compared to most people's 60s or 70s heart rate, which is 120 is pretty high. Anything above 100 is considered tachycardia, and anything above 120 is considered extreme tachycardia. So I'm just casually hanging out, laying in bed with extreme tachycardia, so everybody was freaking out a little bit. So I get up to go to the bathroom, and suddenly while I'm in there, I hear someone frantically rush into the room and start yelling for me. And I'm like, yeah, what do you need? And she's like, are you dizzy? Are you okay? Are you okay? And I'm like, I'm fine. And she just bursts in and she's like, are you dizzy? Are you dizzy? Don't fall. Don't stand up. Don't fall. Don't fall. Don't fall. Just freaking out. Here, grab my arm. Don't fall. Don't fall. So I get back together, fix Gal, whatever. And she starts like very carefully walking me back to bed. Like she's like hovering over me, like, don't fall. Don't fall, don't fall, you're gonna fall, you're gonna fall. So this other nurse walks in before I'm even laying down, and she slaps this heart monitor called the EKG on me and a blood pressure cuff, and she's like, lie down now. She's like, get back in bed. So I'm laying there, and this nurse, she just very calmly, she's like, she's watching the monitor, and she just kind of leans over me as this is totally normal, and she leans in, and she's like, okay, so your heart rate is very, very fast, and we really don't want it to be beating so fast, so I'm gonna go ahead, and I'm gonna call what's called a rapid response, and it's gonna be a little scary, and there's gonna be a lot of people that are gonna come in, but we're gonna help you the best we can, okay? They're gonna what? So she calls what's called a rapid response, which is basically a step down from a code blue. They basically get together kind of the same team that a code blue team responds to. It's sort of the same people. They all come in, they get this EKG done. Everybody's asking questions and poking and prodding, and they're talking and freaking out. These rooms are tiny, and there was like 9 people shoved into this room, and I'm just there like, what's going on? I'm fine, guys, I promise. So they do the EKG. They find absolutely nothing. My heart rate eventually goes back down to the 120s, which isn't good, but it's not ridiculous. I'm not dizzy. It wasn't lightheaded or anything like that. So the mass of people eventually, disappears. And they let me go back to sleep because this was like 3 a.m. But the next night, they called another rapid response. Because I can't say that this one was unjustified, because the one before, the first rapid response was like a little bit overkill. Like I wasn't dizzy, I wasn't gonna fall over. I mean, my heart rate was really high, but it wasn't, I wasn't feeling bad or anything. So my heart rate, that we saw, we don't know if it hit higher when we weren't monitoring it. My heart rate hit an all-time high of 209. 209. And maybe let's, I'm gonna put this into some context here. All right, let's put this into context. So this is about the average of what kind of a normal heart rate is. This is what the average heart rate range is about 70 to 100 BPM. That's normal. That's considered normal. Any lower or any higher is when people start to get worried. This is 80. This is normal. Okay, this is like a good heartbeat. This is a solid resting heart rate. This is, somebody going to bed, whatever. This is where my resting was, laying down, half asleep, just sitting there. That's 124. This was my all-time record, all right? So I get why they were freaked out. So they get another big rush of people in. It's this some of them were the same people from the night before, and so everyone's like, "Oh, you again, you with the weird heart, oh, no, whatever." So after this rapid response, the nurses on the floor that I was on, they basically told my doctors, "We don't know what to do with him. We're not trained in cardiology. We can't handle it." So they shipped me off to the affectionately named Too Wild. The actual floor name was called Too West, but it was called, the nickname was Too Wild for very good reasons. For the rest of my stay there, it was another, I think 5 or 6 days there. There was a woman in the room next to me the entire time screaming for someone named Linda every single night, all night long, at the top of her lungs. And like, there were people trying to break out and go for a smoke. There were people like literally fighting with the nurses. There were people trying to just walk around the hallways naked. It was wild. It was ridiculous. We're on December 12th now, I think. we're not even 2 weeks into December yet. So I was there for about 9 days. I got the medication called Remicade. It's supposedly the strongest, fat and fastest acting biologic for ulcerative colitis and psoriasis. Thank you, Martin. And so the hope is that it would start working really, really, really quickly. And I should be feeling better, supposedly. So they send me home. And it didn't get better. So I had a bunch of pain pills. At this point, they had prescribed me tramadol, which is essentially like a baby narcotic. It's not a narcotic, but it's also like one they don't really give out freely, if that makes sense. I was not getting better. I couldn't walk, couldn't stay awake. It was really bad. But on December 18th, we're finally 2 weeks into December. Finally, we've made it 2 weeks in, all right? I had an appointment for my next dose of Remicade. So it's an infusion medication. So you do what's called a loading dose. And so you'll get one infusion, and then 4 weeks later, or I think it's 2 weeks later, you get one, and then or is it, I think it's 1 week later, then 2 weeks later, 4 weeks, and then every 8 weeks. And so you get them periodically. We show up at the hospital for this infusion. We go into like this fancy little room. It's like some cozy, that had a puzzle out there. And so they wanted to get a blood draw before we went in and got the infusions, just to make sure everything's okay, right? So we go get the blood draw. We sit in the lobby, and they call us back into the room once they get the results. And the guy who's supposed to give me the infusion, he just kind of like gently guides me over to the recliner, sits me down, and he shoves an apple juice in my hand and just starts aggressively checking my pulse. And so it's quiet. He goes quiet for a second, and then he nods and turns to the nurse behind him and just goes, "Yeah, go ahead and let him know we're on our way." Heart rate casually hanging out in the 180s. Didn't break 200s again this time. From the blood draw that we had done, like 20 minutes before this happened, we got the hemoglobin back. You remember the hemoglobin? Like, that really important number? 5.2, which had dropped over less than a week from 9 because I had a blood transfusion. I had brand new blood, and it went from a 9 to a 5 in a week. That's bad. Like, it doesn't really sound that bad if you don't. It doesn't sound that bad if you don't really know what it means. But when the guy told us what it was, me and Dad just start laughing, and we're like, "Of course it is." And he's like, "I'm glad you're laughing because I have no idea how you're sitting here, and I don't know how you're talking right now. You should be knocked out. How have you not been admitted already?" And we're like, "I don't know." So we go over to the ER. They wheel us over. It would not have been safe for me to walk over there. And it wouldn't have been safe for them to give me the infusion either, because they had no idea how my heart would have been able to handle it. Like, it just wouldn't have been safe. So they bring me over, heart rate hanging out in the 160s, and I'm just sitting there. I get another 2 units of blood. Once I'm stable again and like up to not normal, but better amount, they give me the infusion, and they want to keep me for like a couple of days. this isn't even the near experience, Leone. This isn't even the near part. This isn't the scary part. So I get another 2 units of blood. Once I'm stable, they finally give me the infusion, but they want to keep me for a couple of days just to kind of monitor things, make sure I don't drop again, which I did because of course. So I was really lucky we brought the Christmas tree in. We brought in a Christmas tree. We brought in some Christmas lights. We brought in a bunch of stuffed animals. We made it fun. But I was very lucky. I had a very nice doctor. She made sure that I was able to get out in time for Christmas, which honestly was probably a really bad idea. But I'm glad I got to be home for Christmas and New Year's. But it could have ended really badly. She shouldn't have let me go home. I go home. I get to celebrate Christmas and New Year's at home. Just kind of on the couch watching my family do the fun stuff. And I'm like, yeah. But it did not last long. January 6th, I am back in the ER. This time during triage, I was telling the nurses what had been happening, and I started kind of ranting a little bit. I mean, we're in the room for a while. They have to poke me like 12 times because my veins don't work and it's impossible to get an IV in. And I just kind of started ranting, kind of venting a little bit. I had been dealing with ulcerative colitis for about a year at this point, and it was getting old, all right? It was getting old. So in between hospital stays, I had been scrolling on this ostomy subreddit. And I'm not exaggerating. It made me cry. It made me cry. There were people who had it so much worse than I did, who are now rock climbing and touring the world and going to saunas in the mountains in Russia and working search and rescue. And these people are able to do whatever they want and eat whatever they want, and just even being permanently disabled. And I was just like, I don't want to, I'm done with this. I just want to sit at my desk. I don't need to go rock climbing. I just want to make dumb videos. Can I have that, please? So I start telling the triage nurse, and I'm just like, I'm done with this. I just want them to cut it out. Want an ostomy. I'm so done. And the triage nurse looks at me, and he just goes, I get it. It's a really hard road. I was on biologics for 5 years, and none of them worked, and I ended up losing my colon. And the other nurse who was doing the charting for me, she just started telling a story about her mom who got her life back with an ostomy. Essentially, an ostomy is, it's what you think it is. So what people usually know of it is called a colostomy. And a colostomy is when they take out your small intestine. And so it's your, they take this is gruesome. If you're squeamish, maybe click off, but it's important part of the story, okay? I'm sorry. So they remove your, for a colostomy, they remove your small intestine, reconnect everything, and then they take the end of your colon and basically poke it out through your abdomen, which, gosh, we're gonna, in the video, we'll add a trigger warning. If you guys are squeamish, I'm so sorry. We'll click off now. It does not get better. But for my condition, ulcerative colitis, it specifically targets the colon. So Crohn's is the entire digestive system, from mouth to butt. It's the entire thing. But ulcerative colitis is just the colon. So for me, an ostomy would be what's called an ileostomy. And an ileostomy is when they take out your colon and take the end of your small intestine and poke it out through your abdomen on the other side. I was like, I just want them to cut out my organs. I'm done with this. And so talking to those two triage nurses, solidified it in my mind as this is what I really want. It's hard. It's very hard to picture disability aids and things like that. At least for me, it's hard. And when I say ostomy or colostomy, most people think of some angry grandpa who harasses nurses and is just miserable, You don't think of a healthy 20-year-old who works for 12 hours at a time and does search and rescue. That's not what you picture. You don't picture somebody being able to be a nurse or be able to be a doctor or do search and rescue. That's wild. Anyway, they take me back to the ER. What was really scary about this day was they put me in the room that's right next to the ambulance bay. So this is the giant you're room. They put it there. They put me there because it was just, I think, the nearest room available, and they needed to put me somewhere. But holy crap, this room is scary. Like, they've got everything in this room. This is the like, bring you in on a stretcher, we need 80 people in here, have the crash cart on standby room. This is the scary room. It's like in the back of a Starbucks where it has the menus on how to make drinks, but it's just how to give people like intense narcotics when they're like, it was freaky. But everybody was really, really nice. Everybody was really helpful. Like, I had some terrible times with IVs during this, and everybody was like very patient with how bad, like, they had to bring in a guy from like downstairs or from upstairs in the phlebotomy lab. They had to bring him downstairs. They had to break out the ultrasound just to get a stupid IV in. Everybody was being very patient with me. But I get another 2 units of blood, stay the night, and I'm off again. This one was just super quick. Should I have stayed? Absolutely. The hospital's focused on just turning over beds? Absolutely. Could I have died going home? Absolutely. I should not have gone home, but it wasn't much longer before I went back in. We had a blood test that was ordered by a separate doctor, and basically she called us and was like, yeah, go back in the ER, please. You're bad. This is bad. Go back in, please. We've fought to stay out of the ER because we were very, very tired of the ER. We were like, nah, they keep just sending us home. We can't just like go back and get blood and go home. We need a plan. And then we went in that day. We went in later that day because we're like, okay, yeah. This time hemoglobin wasn't as bad. It wasn't as bad. But it was a 6.4, which is still the threshold to get a blood transfusion is a 7. They won't administer blood unless you're going for surgery or you're below a 7. That's like the harsh cutoff. I really wish that I could put this into some like easy to understand context, because saying it out loud, it doesn't sound that bad, but it's bad. So we go into the ER, and it was really, really busy. Like I've seen some busy ERs before, but this was packed. It was bad. So there were people being treated on beds out in the hallway. Every single chair was filled. It was loud, chaotic. It was a mess. It was really, really bad. There's a story here, but I think if I tell it, I'll dox myself. So I'm gonna kill. Something really bad happened at the only other hospital in my town, and everyone was really scared to go there. So everybody was coming to our ER, or to like this one ER, because nobody wanted to go to the other one. They were like, they're gonna. So we get in, I get a wheelchair, I'm in my pajamas, I look nasty, I haven't showered in like probably 3 weeks. We get called back into the triage room, and surprise, my heart rate is in the 180s, and they go to get an IV in, and like my veins were just poked to hell. They are like scarred up. I'm not hydrated at all because I'm just constantly ill, can't keep water down. It was very hard to get an IV in. It was hard beforehand, but now being dehydrated and scarred and like feverish, oh gosh, having all of that, it just made the IV that much worse. So he goes for the elbow, which is a bad spot for me already, but as he's like drawing blood and going for the IV, my ears start ringing, my vision goes dark, and I can't hold up my head, and out I go. This is the first time I have ever like blacked out. I've had my vision go dark before, gotten close, but I've never passed out. It was really, really freaky and surprisingly very painful. Like I thought it would. Like, when you see people, like, faint on TV, whatever, it looks almost graceful, if that makes sense. Like, it's just like, oh, you know? But, like, it hurts. Like, it feels like a full body cramp. It's really weird. But, so, like, 1 second, everything's black, I can't hear it all, and I'm like, I can't hold my head up, and I open my eyes, and, I'm out for a second, and I open my eyes, and I'm like, wait a second, did I just passed out? And I look over at my dad. I look over at him, and he's just like he is white as it goes. He's somehow paler than I am, and he looks scared out of his mind. So I was only out for a few seconds, but apparently when I passed out, I like picked up my arms and like I squeezed my elbows, so I went like this space. I sort of like went like that in my sleep, or not in my sleep, while I was out, and like my whole body like tensed up while I was out for those couple seconds. And he said it looked like I was having a seizure, but I wasn't. It was apparently like the nurse was very, very calm about it. He was just like, it's whatever. It's probably the IV, just like it's no big deal. And we're over there like, what? So, because of my frankly terrifying symptoms, they called us back really, really quick, and we got to pass by the entire room full of people. That I get started on some blood, and they get me an actually usable IV. I get lots and lots of very, very strong pain meds. Yada yada. We've done this before. Boring. We know how to. We've been here. We know this. We know the drill. Side note, by the way, this was a very weird day. This was very, very strange. I went back for a CT while they were like getting me like kind of like admitted. They were figuring out a plan, whatever. They take me back for a scan, and the nurses in the CT start talking. And apparently, literally minutes before they brought me down, there was a fiery car accident outside the hospital parking lot. Just like right there. It was crazy. It was just right there. It was like a Grey's Anatomy moment. So apparently there was a police officer who was just getting off of work at like as security at the ER. And as he was pulling out of the parking lot, he got hit by somebody whose heart had literally stopped while they were driving. And like, it was literally, there were people running outside, pulling people out of cars from the ER, running in and pulling people out of literally burning cars. I go upstairs, get a room. We're in Too Wild again, because of course we are. I say hello to the whole nursing team that I know very well. I'll be totally honest. There's not a whole lot that I remember about this section, but I do remember it was really rough. I don't remember a lot because I was on a lot of pain meds all the time. So there was a lot of, it's kind of blurry. So there was a lot of going back and forth with the GI team and the hospital, who were just telling me that I have to wait it out. And I was just being done and being like, no, I'm not going home. I know what's going to happen. Like, I'm done with this. And they're like, just give the medication a couple more weeks. I'm like, I don't have another few weeks. I'm done. Can't do this anymore. So it's a little over a week or two. And then it kind of starts to get a little scary. And I won't go into details for very obvious reasons, but I'd gone to the bathroom and there was a lot of blood. And I mean a lot. Oh gosh. And I started to black out. So we call the nurse, like I'm fully blacking out, can't hear anything. We call the nurse in and she's like holding me upright so I don't fall over. And I could not stand off of the door. This is so embarrassing. I could not stand up off of the bathroom. So they finally get me. I think they like help me get into like a recliner like right outside the door, because each of the rooms, they had their own like tiny little bathrooms in there. And so they get me out into this recliner and I lay down. And I'm like still going in and out. And so they do this thing that's called a bolus. So picture the amount of water that's in 2 of these, put them in a bag, and then run it through your veins over the course of 5 minutes. That's what a bolus is. It's a type of saline. It's a lot of saline that goes super, super fast. They push it really, really quick. I finally started being able to wake. After getting those, I'm finally like able to be conscious. And I look around and I see I think it was 7 people in the room, all working on like keeping me awake. And like there was a couple people talking in a corner, and there were 2 people over me, and there was somebody watching like the monitors and the IVs, and it was ridiculous. And it was really crazy. That part's a blur. But a couple days later, get some more blood. I get another infusion of my meds, and finally I start feeling a little better, enough to sit upright at least. They also finally set me up with a general surgery team. So I wasn't scheduled for a surgery or anything at this point, but I was able to meet the coolest surgeon ever. We'll call him Dr. M. And we met with him and his team, and we just talk about kind of like what I want, how I'm feeling, why I want the surgery. And at this point, I had studied the surgery. I had gone like through medical journals that are like step by steps with images and diagrams and everything of how the surgery works. I'd spent hours reading people's like horror stories and success stories of the surgery and seeing like what it could look like if I got it. So he tells me, okay, we can't do the surgery right now. Your GI team wants to wait for the meds to work. But let's meet on February 9th and we'll talk, all right? When you get home, we'll have a meeting in my office. We'll deal with it then, all right? And we're like, okay. So the GI team comes back in and basically tells me, your numbers are trending back up. You're probably safe to go home. So let's start getting you ready for discharge. Your numbers are looking great. We see this stuff start picking up, whatever. I had the exact same numbers that they did. The exact same numbers on my phone. They were not trending up. They were barely hanging in and trending slightly downwards. They were monitoring a bunch of different stuff, but I was getting every single update. Whatever they saw on their labs, I was seeing the exact same thing. I had it on my phone. And so they would tell me, he would come in and be like, yeah, so, your hemoglobin, your iron, your, there's a marker. It's like a inflammatory marker. It basically monitors the amount of inflammation. He kept telling me, it's trending back up. We're doing great. We can get you home. They were not trending up, nor in like safe ranges whatsoever. I basically told him, I know what this is. I have felt this before. I can see the numbers. I've gone through this over and over again. I know that I'm about to start crashing. I know my body. This is not going to last. I am on the track to going downward. I will be, if we go home today, we will be back within the week to get another blood transfusion. And I don't want to do that. So we told him that. And I told the same thing to our hospitalist, and she basically set up a few choices for me. She said, 1, I can go home and I could wait for my appointment with the surgeon, or I can stay the weekend, keep monitoring my blood levels and the other numbers, and see what happens. I can basically give myself the chance to get worse, because I was like, I'm going to, and she's like, maybe we'll find out. You can stay if you want, I guess. Yes, thank you, Dadish. A hospitalist is a dedicated inpatient physician who works exclusively at the hospital. So they're like a general practitioner, but they're just in the hospital. They're like kind of the person who oversees your case, basically. So we went back and forth on it a little bit because I was very tired of the hospital, but I know if I went home, I was going to come back anyway. And we had this kind of idea in our heads that if we got bad enough, they might send us up to Portland to get the surgery anyway. Oh, and then a giant ice storm happened in Portland, so that wasn't happening. But we went back and forth on it for a while, and eventually we decided to stay. We decided to stay the weekend. We're like, wait it out, see what happens Monday. If it's better, we'll go home, we'll wait, it'll be fine. So we stayed. And that night had another terrifying blood loss, passing out, bad terribleness. At this point, it was the weekend, and basically there are hospitalists there, but they're sort of like on-call hospitalists. They're if you need us hospitalists. The GI team wasn't there. Basically, on Friday, everybody had signed off on my case, assuming that the other team was going to take care of it. So the general surgery team signed off saying, we're waiting for medication. And the GI team signed off and said, we're waiting for surgery. So there was just nobody in charge of me over this weekend. So Monday rolls around, and my hospitalist comes in and she says, look, I've got to send you home. Your numbers are fine, which they were very not. And the surgeon is going to say no, and it doesn't even matter if he says no or not, because he's not in the office for another week. He's on vacation. We can't ask him right now. You're going to have to wait for February. And we say, okay, whatever. And as soon as she leaves, I just break down. I was not ready for another month of this. I could not do it. I was not okay. I was not okay with this. But we really didn't have any other choice. It was like, they're going to kick us out. Like, what are we supposed to do? Like barricade ourselves in the room? There's nothing we can really do. Not even an hour later, the surgeon comes in and says, hey, so we're going to schedule your surgery now. Did she just lie? Like, she told me he wasn't going to be there the entire week. So, February 2nd, it's like 4 a.m. I'll wake up early, have a little shower, and I am in the waiting room for the surgery. It went very, very quick. I want to say it was only 2 or 3 days after they told me to when we went in for the surgery. It was very, very quick. So they gave me, from what I understand, is essentially like spinal morphine. It's a shot in your spinal cord. It's pain meds directly in your spinal cord. It's supposed to make recovery and the after part of surgery. It's like a less dramatic epidural. I'm wheeled in, they get me moved over to the chair, and I was out like a light. As far as I know, which Dadish might correct me on this, I was only out for about 4 or 5 hours. I think the surgery itself was maybe 3 or 4. I don't know. It was quite a while, but I woke up, I got wheeled back to my room. And honestly, I don't remember a lot of this part. I remember my throat really hurt because I was intubated. When you get under general anesthesia, you get intubated because you can't protect your own airway, so they don't want you to like choke on your spit, whatever. And intubated, so my throat really, really hurt. I couldn't really remember anything else, except the only thing I remember really clearly is telling the nurse and my dad, I'm totally gonna remember all this, guys. I don't even think drugs affect me. I remember everything. I feel fine. I'm fine, guys. I'm gonna remember all of this. That's all I remember. That was it. Recovery began. I'm gonna throw in a little note here. For editing me, let's stitch this in here, okay? I've been telling this story for 1 hour and 16 minutes. I'm in February 2nd. We got out of the hospital in March. We're like halfway done. But finally, recovery began, all right? We're like end stretch now. I started walking the same day. That's part of like the whole protocol to help with recovery is they get you up and walking right away. They were training me on how to take care of the ostomy. It was feeling great. And a few days go by, I start eating like actual food now. During this whole time, I've essentially been on a liquid diet or like strict no food allowed, which is NPO, just in case I get surgery or because eating was horribly, horribly painful. So I had eaten basically nothing for about 3 weeks. And so finally I start getting food and it's great. I'm getting better. As long as nothing goes horribly wrong, I'll be out of here like in a couple of days. Dawn of day 25, it all goes horribly wrong. I wake up at probably maybe 2, 3 a.m. early in the morning. I wake up, horrible pain. We're running out of pain meds to take. I am like, they only let you have a certain amount per hour of like what's dosed or what's what's prescribed by the hospitalist. I had gone through all of my prescribed pain meds. I had nothing left. I couldn't take like the big stuff like the Dilaudid. I couldn't take that for another couple more hours. I just had to hold out long enough to get like another round of meds, whatever. I finally start calming down a little bit. Still in a lot of pain, but it gets a little bit better. And I'm able to curl up like with a little warm blanket. I got my Switch. I have season 18 of Hell's Kitchen up. It's 4:30. Time for some vitals. The CNA comes in. She, puts the blood pressure on. And I scoot over to the side to like get my arm closer to her. And, oh, ow, 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 ow. Oh my God, ow. Horrible, horrible pain. It was like God had come for revenge. It hurt so bad. It was horrible, horrible, horrible. I will never be upset about a patient being loud in the middle of the night ever again. I will never complain about somebody crying in the middle of the night at the hospital. I just never will. I get it. I get it now. I was losing my mind. It was so bad. I after screaming and crying for like 20 minutes, I was panicking and crying and freaking out. We got a lot of pain meds down. They finally got approval to give me let me put this into perspective. Morphine is a very strong painkiller. Morphine is very, very strong. It's the one that like everybody's like, oh, it's the big gun, whatever. But like all of IV pain meds, it doesn't last very long. IV pain meds, they work really, really quickly, but they just don't last very long. But it is strong. It's good, but it doesn't last very long. So at some point, they switched me over to Dilaudid, which is, as the hospitalist put it, 10 times stronger than morphine. When they first started me on it, they had me on 0.2 milligrams, and then it started to get a little bit worse. With like the panic emergency, it's really bad dose was 0.4, and that always worked really, really well. It's small, but for what my issue supposedly was, it's kind of a lot. Those two doses worked pretty well, helped knock me out. I was able to deal with it. To deal with this pain, they had to give me 2 full milligrams to get me to stop being in horrible pain. 2 full, that's a lot. That's a lot. This is a side tangent. Since we got home from the hospital, I started rewatching Grey's Anatomy. I don't know why either. There are people who like literally lose their limbs. They're in a horrible pain. They're like in horrible car accidents, and they're like, push 4 of morphine. And I'm like, just morphine? Just? And I was freaking out a little bit because the pain had never been this bad. It had never been so sudden. I hadn't been nauseous before, which I now really, really was. And they set me up with an abdominal x-ray, and they called for like a bunch of labs. They're like, we're going to figure this out. This is, freaky, whatever. I called Dadish because I was sad and scared, and he hangs out with me. I get calmed down. Pain meds kick in. And then this like really, really jarring phone call came in. They have these phones on the side of the beds that sometimes the doctors will call her. They're so loud. They are so stinking loud. It was a very, very very nice lady from radiology. This very nice radiologist, and she very kindly told me that, surprise, I have a blood clot. I have a lovely little blood clot right in the veins called the superior mesenteric artery. These are the veins, they take the blood from the small intestine out and they go through the liver to clean it. And so there was a big clot there. Whenever I ate something, whenever you eat, you get your blood kind of redirects to go to your digestive system and like helps get things moving, right? So anytime I would eat or drink or like swallow or do anything, all the blood would go to my small intestines, and but then they couldn't leave. And so it was very, very painful. It would get very, very stuck. And the problem with that, when the blood can't leave, essentially there's no circulation getting to that part of your organs, right? There's no, in simple terms, your organs can die. There was a very real risk of my small intestine getting necrotic because there wasn't blood flow going through it, and it could have basically like rotted inside of my body. That's what the risk with having this clot was. If it didn't get resolved, my organs could die. That's why it was scary. Dawn of day 26. I can't get blood draws anymore. For the past 3 weeks, my veins had just been abused, beat up, shredded, torn, blown out, just demolished, and the lab techs could not get any. It was bad. At one point I was on a 6-hour cycle of blood draws for about 2 weeks straight. So well, at first it was 4 hours. So every 4 hours they would wake me up to draw my blood, and then they switched it every 6 hours. So it was what is that? 4 times a day. Like, this lab lady, she's scanning over my arm. She's trying to find a spot amongst like the insane amount of bruises, which I have a picture of how like black and blue my arm was. Like, even with the AccuVein, could not get anything. I think she poked me maybe 3 or 4 times trying to get it. Could not get it. So the lab tech, she goes to tell the nurse, and she's like, "Hey, I'm not poking anymore. I'm torturing him over here. I can't get anything." And the nurse goes, "Let's try from the feet. Let's draw from the feet," which is a thing that you can do, and it's the worst thing ever, and didn't work. And so finally, my surgeon, after lots of nurses like calling him and being like, "Hey, we need to do something. Hey, we need to do something," and he puts in an order for what's called a PICC line. So a PICC line is it's a central line, and if you've heard that in like medical shows before, it stands for peripheral intravenous central catheter, or PICC, not PICK. It's just like a regular IV. It's basically the same thing, except for the fact that, okay, so regular IVs, there's a lot of different spots that they can go. For me, I had them in my hands a lot because that was like the easiest place to get. Typically, you'll get them in like your elbows. Sometimes you'll get them in your forearm. I had a couple that were like up here. It just kind of depends where they can get you, right? They just go right into your veins, pretty shallow. Catheter's only about like that big, baby. Even on the longer catheters that are like the deep vein ones, they're really only like that, maybe a bit longer. A PICC line, it goes, I wonder if you guys can see it. Can you see that on there? Kind of. You see the tiny little purple dot? That is my scar from a PICC line. It goes from here through your vein down into your heart. It goes right here to where the veins kind of like all connect to, and then goes down into your heart. It's a direct line through your veins. The PICC line, the reason they put in the PICC line was, one, so that they could draw blood. You can't draw blood from a regular IV because you can essentially damage the vein. You basically like suction the vein back out, and you can make the vein collapse and blow out. You can really damage it. So you're not supposed to draw blood out from an IV unless like absolutely necessary. But they also gave me what's called TPN, which I believe is called total patient nutrition, I think is what it's called. It looks like a bag of grease. Like it looks like a bag of like shortening. It's really weird. TPN is it's nutrition without the food part. So it's basically all the vitamins and minerals and whatever you need from food in bag form, if that makes sense. So they get the PICC line in. It's week 5 of this hospital stay. The days start blending together. Time is simply a construct that people refer to and truly holds no meaning. Yesterday is today is tomorrow never existed, and Goose is my only friend. That's Goose. So the surgeon comes in, basically lays it all out. We are waiting for a heparin drip in my IV to break down the clot, which, 1, we can already tell it's not working, and 2, we have about a week before the clot solidifies. So heparin is a blood-thinning medication that works really, really quickly. The goal was we bring the heparin in through the IV, it goes through all my blood, and goes punchy, destroy story to the clot. We're all good. It's all good. That wasn't working. We could try and go in to get out the clot. It's basically like you just go in a little vacuum it, right? At this point, I have incredibly fragile veins because of the steroids and the other medications that I was on before. My skin and my veins were just so incredibly friable and fragile. So the risk of this procedure, it's called a thrombectomy. The risk is very, very high for me. Basically, the concern is that they can cause some kind of internal bleeding. And like even the tiniest tiny little thing could be catastrophic. But the heparin wasn't working, so it was like kind of all they had. This procedure made my ego so big. It was ridiculous. Throughout this whole time, my surgeon has been all with your rare case and with how special your case is, and like the doctor doing the procedure comes in and says, I'm tracking down a doctor to come do the anesthesiology, which they hate, but I think you're more important. And I'm like, I'm special? I'm special. I'm special in surgery, right, guys? I'm special, I'm fancy. But during the procedure, they go in with the little suction guy, they go in with the clot vacuum thing. They go in, num num num, get the clot, check, oh, it's gone. Okay, we'll back out, get the thing, make sure everything's all good, one last double check, and it's back. And so they're like, okay, and they go back in and they get it back out, and the clot's gone, and they got it back out, and it's back again. Somehow. That just doesn't happen, by the way. That's not an explained risk. That's not in the paperwork that they give you. Like, it just does not happen. A few days go by, and the pain had like mostly gone. I felt so much better after the thrombectomy. I was doing great. Went back to what I would like expect after surgery pain is, because like I'm not gonna be pain free. Of course, I didn't expect that. But it went back to like typical, hey, I'm missing an organ pain, if that makes sense. I start getting back into moving. Start trying to eat a little bit. But as time goes on, the pain starts coming back, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And so that Sunday morning, my surgeon's physician's assistant, or PA, comes in. He like sits down with us, and I explained to him, we had called him in, and I was like, hey, something's wrong. And I explained to him, like, hey, I'm having the same pain that I was having before when I had the clot. And it was a very, very specific kind of pain. It's kind of hard to describe, but it was very, very specific. We do the CT, and the clot's still there, even after being demolished 3 times. And now the PA, he doesn't come back to tell us about the plan. He doesn't really come back and say, hey, the clot's back, we're gonna do this. But we got a phone call from my surgeon, Dr. M, which is, always fun to get a phone call from your surgeon during the weekend when they're not on call. And he basically tells us, okay, so pack your bags. You need a cardiology surgeon, and all of ours are on vacation, so we're taking you to Portland. Okay. 3 hours later, I'm in the back of a prop plane headed for Portland. That was a nightmare. We went in I have some pictures, but we were in the back of an ambulance, drove over to the airport, and we get flown over to Portland. The next day, the ball starts rolling. We start to meet the team. First meeting, it's the hospitalist, all right? The hospitalist, basically the one who wrangles the team together, gets everything in order. So we meet him, he's cool. Next people are general surgery. It was the surgeon and his physician's assistant who basically told us that they're going to be watching from afar. They're going to be watching from a distance, just kind of monitoring my case. They have no plans to get involved. If they're involved, something's wrong, all right? So we meet them. The next team comes in is cardiology, the surgeon and the cardiology surgeon and his PA. And they introduce themselves, and they're like, we're going to be watching from afar, we're just here to monitor your case. If we're involved, something's wrong. And then the next team comes in, they're interventional radiology. They come in, introduce themselves, and they basically say, we're watching from afar, and if they're involved, something's wrong. Who's watching from a normal distance? And really what I would say this is, we have 9 people on my case from general surgery, cardiology, hematology, radiology, and gastroenterology, all in like a doctor group chat, talking about what to do with me and getting nothing done. Nobody knew what to do with me. I was just sitting there and like, So we waited and we waited and we waited for any sort of update. They kept me NPO or no food, just in case they decided to do some kind of procedure, which they didn't have planned, but they also didn't not have it planned. So if they needed to do something emergency wise, that they would just they could just get me right in. Wouldn't be dangerous or anything. So eventually, they start coming, the whole team kind of starts coming in one by one, and they're like, we're gonna back off. We're gonna let this thing dissolve on its own. And they decided to keep me just on blood thinners and wait it out, basically. They're trying to just see if it'll go away on its own. That's the best thing that they could do. So we ask them, why can't we just get another thrombectomy like we did last time? That worked so well. Why can't we just do that again? And the hematologist just goes, no, they're not going to do that. That would be impossible. If they tried to do that, you'd die. Huh? What? Nobody told us. So the next day, we get the general surgeon in. All right, and I've got this for you guys. We get the general surgeon in. And he draws this for us, which this is my very crude tracing of what he drew for us. So this is the small bowel over here. This is, I believe, I might have this wrong, but this is the spleen, this is the liver, and this artery right here, if you guys can see it, this big one here is the superior mesenteric vein. So it's the one that takes the blood and goes and filters it. So he draws this out for us, and he's like, so before your clot was right about there. And so we could go in and we can get it really, really, really easy. We could go ahead, it was super, super easy to go and get. Now, this time, your clot is here. So they're not gonna go get it. And they're not gonna go try and get it. I would die. And we got it. We got it now. We understand. They set me up with the blood thinners, they set me up with the pain medications, and we just waited. We just waited for a while. This point, it was kind of like a waiting game. It was very anticlimactic, honestly. For having such a dramatic story and like life-threatening, losing an organ, life-flighted, very, very anticlimactic ending. Very, very boring. We just waited it out. I stopped being in pain, stopped needing the narcotics. I stopped needing the TPN because I could eat on my own again. I was getting back into physical therapy, starting to walk again, and we're like, okay, that's it. And on March 13th, sent us home, and that was it, basically. I mean, it was very, very a boring end for what the whole thing was. That's the crazy story. It was I wanted to, so basically I wanted to make this video because I thought it would be really fun to kind of like, a lot of people find the hospital to be very, very scary, and that's not unreasonable whatsoever. The hospital is terrifying. Being scared to go to the hospital only makes you suffer more because chances are you'll have people to like support you and make it less scary, and the longer you wait, the more the scarier it ends up being. I waited a very, very long time to get diagnosed, because like ulcerative colitis is one of the chronic illnesses that everybody's embarrassed about, and so you have symptoms of that chronic illness, especially when you're like an awkward teenager in high school. You don't know what to do, and I waited a very long time to get diagnosed, and there's a good chance that if I hadn't waited so long, I would have gotten diagnosed sooner, and I would have gotten treated sooner, and would not have to end up losing my colon. And so I wanted to, if I had somebody who was talking about ulcerative colitis on the internet as chill as it is, because it's really not a big deal. Like, it just isn't. Like, it just is not. And ostomies are just really not a big deal. There's a very large portion of the population who has ostomies or had ostomies. You can get them reversed. Like, it's really not that big of a deal. And if I had somebody like myself talking on the internet about the uncomfortable, awkward hospital thing in a way that's digestible, as ironic, then maybe I wouldn't have waited to get diagnosed for so long. And so my PSA is, don't wait. Take your health seriously, even if you think it's small. If something starts to intrude on your life, that's when it becomes a problem, and that's when you need to get it fixed. And so that's my PSA. That's my PSA. Yeah. It sucks how embarrassed people are about things like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's. Which I get it. I'm still getting over it myself. But also, both of them are really not uncommon. And so there was probably a lot of people who are not getting diagnosed because they're embarrassed and living at 20% of the life that they could have, and just accepting and being like, well, this is terrible. This is what my life now is now. Does that make sense? And I wish to be an agent of change in that problem. So